our Sports Radio 92.3 The Fan.
And away we go. It's the Browns offseason special. Jake Volnick on assignment tonight. It's Daryl Reiner, Coach Lance Reisland with you. We'll be covering a whole lot between now and 9 o'clock. Of course, we are with you here in the offseason each and every Tuesday from 7 to 9. Browns Executive Vice President of Football Operations and General Manager Andrew Berry was front and center at the NFL Combine. Had a lot to say, a lot to cover, and we are going to break it all down for you over the next 2 hours. What he said, how he said it, what it actually means, because sound bites are not sworn testimony. However, a lot of times they do shed some light in on the thinking of what Andrew Berry and the Browns' approach are going to be this offseason, Coach. And we see this every year at Indianapolis because of the Combine. It is, I think, one of the more overly dissected weeks on the NFL calendar, but it all matters, regardless of whether I think it matters or not, or what I feel matters or not. But, a lot of interesting stuff came from Andrew today, and we're going to dive into it over the next 2 hours. Yeah, very interesting. His comments on the quarterback position, the O-line, how they value stuff. The Combine to me is I'm kind of not in the majority here. I look at it differently. The film has got to tell me first, right? And then I'll go back. So after I see some numbers and things like that, it either confirms it or it doesn't confirm it. But for me, there's nothing worse than a guy who is incredibly talented at the Combine, but that production doesn't show up on game day. And that's sometimes that's what happens with the analytics people, is that the numbers speak more than the film. So I'm interested to see how these guys run. I'm interested to see how they talk in front of people, some of the things they say. But yeah, Andrew Berry, always keeping it close to the best. We'll break down some of the things he said, especially about the offensive line and how they evaluate those offensive linemen. Yeah, a lot of interesting things that Berry had to say when it came to the offensive linemen and how they evaluate them and their ability to evaluate them. I know you have certainly some thoughts on that. Let's kind of dive right into it because, Andrew Berry had said when they hired Todd Monken, he made it very, very clear that the Browns were going to be one of the younger teams in the NFL. Now, typically when I hear that the Browns are going to be one of the younger teams in the NFL, I kind of assume it's going to be a long year because, quite frankly, it usually is. Pretty much every Browns season ends up being a very long year with the exception of a very select few. But let's start here. This is what Andrew Berry said today at the Combine about having, or I should say the expectation of having a young roster.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that youth equals lack of performance. I think 2 of the 3 youngest teams this past year were Philadelphia and Green Bay. I think, we're a little bit unique in the NFL where it's not like, baseball where a team, a prospect has to be in the farm system for 7 years before they hit the big league level. There is certainly an adjustment period for young players, but we want to have high expectations for guys that, that come into our program to be role players, to ascend into starters. And I think we saw that this past year with this past draft class.
Well, they were young last year. They won 5 games. Now, luckily, the younger players, for the most part, produced. Mason Graham had a very productive rookie season. Harold Fannin Jr. led the team in receptions as a tight end. It was another year in which the leading receiver didn't play the position. Carson Schlesinger, your defensive rookie of the year. So all in all, a pretty good debut for that rookie class. But the results on the field were not very favorable.
Well, and that's where it's the bottom line is you got to win. And when they say a young team doesn't usually equal wins or people believe that, I will say this: regardless of how young or old you are, if you're not good up front, you have no chance. And that's really where the Browns are at right now. Obviously, some of that was age, some of that was injury. Some of that was scheme. All those things tied in, but the offensive line didn't play very well this year. And if you're thinking about 5 new, and everybody says, well, there's teams that did it this year and they had a lot of success and all those kind of things, you got to get the right people. And I think it's really important that they get some veterans in there. Even if they draft high and they get some really talented offensive linemen, they got to get some veterans either in a trade or free agency to kind of lead the way, especially if Joel doesn't come back. And Joel coming back now is even more crucial with Teller being gone, because this is a unit that's going to have, and all schemes are very similar, but there's going to be new verbiage. There's going to be new check with me's. There's going to be things that are a little bit different. And if you're going to be young and you're not going to be very successful, it's going to be because you're not good up front. They got to get better up front, regardless of what they do at any other position on both sides of the ball. The offensive line has to get better.
And we're going to get into next hour the offensive line, the situation regarding Joel Bitonio, some of Andrew Berry's thoughts on rebuilding that unit, because, quite frankly, they're going to have to rebuild that unit this offseason. The plan for putting this thing back together, Andrew Berry shed a little light on that as well. Now, they didn't do a lot in free agency last year, so it's pretty easy to assume they're going to do some more this year. But what does that look like? This is what Berry had to say.
I would anticipate that there's at least the chance that we would be a little bit more aggressive more aggressive than last year. But it'll be targeted and opportunistic. I think, realistically, we may be one more offseason away from being like hyper aggressive in that window. But if there's something that fits us, fits our roster, fits our timeline, then it's certainly a swing we'll take.
All right, let's put that through the Andrew Berry translator right now. What he is saying is if they do spend any big money in free agency, it's going to be 1 or 2 guys. They are not going on a mega free agency shopping spree when you're talking about spending big dollars. Now, they're going to have to fill a lot of holes, I think, in free agency. Tight end comes to mind, the wide receiver room. They're going to need to sign somebody to help there. They definitely are going to have to sign a couple of offensive linemen. We'll get into the quarterback situation next segment. But, Coach, when you hear that from Andrew Berry, where he's saying, hey, next year is when we're, and these are his words, you just heard it, hyper-aggressive. Next year, what does that tell you about this year? Because right now, that's what fans really care about. They're not really concerned about 2027. And I realize Andrew Berry has to not only plan for today, he's got to plan for tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. But what does that say to you when you listen to that from Berry?
Well, first of all, that's his job. And that's how, as a coach, that's how I would look at it. And how this, I have always liked the coaches have more pull than the GM, especially with the roster. It doesn't always work that way, as we know, as I'm learning it myself. But that really bothers me because the guy, Monken's on the field. So you hope he has some say in what they're doing and how they're doing it. To say they're not going to be hyper-aggressive, okay, maybe skill-wise or maybe a linebacker or an edge guy, whatever they're thinking. But if you're going to spend money this year, it's got to be up front. You're talking like Rasheed Walker from the Packers or Linderbaum. If you're going to make a splash with 1 or 2 guys, I think it's got to be up front because once again, you can make a splasher with the receiver. We'll talk about the quarterbacks, the running backs, all these things. If you're not good up front, it's hard to evaluate these things. And if the Browns don't get better up front, how are they going to evaluate their quarterback position? Because that guy's going to be under siege. You're not going to run the ball. It's going to be not look really good. So I think if they're going to make a splash this year and they're going to spend some money, I think that money needs to go to the offensive line.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I think that if they do spend money this offseason, it's got to be up front. And again, a little later in the show, we're going to get into what Andrew Berry had to say about this offensive line because that is, aside from the quarterback situation, I feel like that is the second most important thing they've got to figure out. I would argue, and I, having worked with you the way I have, I would think that you would argue that actually is the most important thing that they got to get squared away is the offensive line. But again, we're going to dive into that a little later in the show because Andrew Berry had some interesting things to say there. Also, too, because you and I have this conversation a lot, I am usually guilty of making fun of the Browns with regularity, and it's just because, well, they give us a lot of material to work with. Hey, you give me the punchlines, I tell the jokes. One thing that happened was they, as they always do, took a lot of heat and got clowned on by the national media for their approach to the head coaching process. And you are very consistent in lamenting the Browns' approach to how they handle these type of things. Now, Andrew Berry was asked today about the whole essay thing. Now, I had said, folks that I had talked to within the organization told me, Daryl, the essay thing's a little overblown. It's just, yes, we did have a little bit of a questionnaire that we sent out to these guys. We wanted them to fill out before they came into the interview process so that we had a little bit of a baseline to work with. We wanted them to be very detailed. It's just like any other job you apply for. You have to do these type of things. Andrew Berry was asked today to, once again, explain the head coaching search process that involved this questionnaire and that ultimately led them to Todd Monken.
Tom created a little brush fire, didn't he? Unfortunately, maybe some of that stuff was maybe a little bit mischaracterized and overblown. But, look, the head coaching position is the most important position in the organization, or head coach and quarterback are. It's really like you're hiring a CEO for any other company. The other thing is the hiring rules for the NFL are a lot more unique than they are probably in any other industry. Number one, we want to know everything that we can about candidates, and that includes, reference work, that includes obviously the interview process, their work history, behavioral assessment, cognitive assessment. It's that important. And one of the things that we did was we gave, some of the candidates maybe 5 prompts, so to speak, that we would talk about during that virtual session. But it's better to get them ahead of time than necessarily get it on the spot, and then you have to answer something that's a little bit more deep and involved. So it was something that was really fruitful for us.
So you listen to that, and it makes total sense, and I like what he said. But when you don't come out in the word transparency, everybody wants transparency, and not everybody in the NFL. Most teams don't tell you what they're doing. But when you have no idea what the process is, and you have been not very good, and that's the reality. Your record hasn't been very good. That frustrates people, and what that ends up happening. And again, I always refer to my dad in these situations: is when you let other people write the narrative, they're going to write it, and that's what's kind of happened here with the Browns. Is that they kept it hidden, and then everybody thinks these guys had to sit down and take these essay tests, and they were doing the ACT and all these kind of things. And really, what it comes down to is probably pretty common to what a lot of teams do, but we don't know anything. So we fill in the blanks how we want to fill in the blanks, and when you're not successful, you're assuming they're not done right, and it doesn't always mean that. But that's how I felt. You don't know anything, and you're like, all right, so they're doing this, that makes them different. Why do they always have to do those things like that? In reality, this is probably pretty similar, but again, we don't know.
Yeah, the explanation makes total sense.
Yeah,
would have been nice to hear that about 4 weeks ago, right? Could have saved a lot of problems. All right, we are just getting started here on the Browns offseason special. There is a big elephant in the room. Andrew Berry spoke about that as well. We'll get into that next. It's the offseason special. Daryl Ryder, Lance Reisland, Jake Volnick on assignment with you till 9 here on The Fan.
Sports news every 20 minutes here on 92.3 The Fan. From the University Hospital Sports Desk, I'm Michael Markoch.
When you want the latest on the Cavs, we're the station you turn to first. 92.3 The Fan is Cleveland's home for breaking sports news. Your teams, your station. Catch all the latest Browns and NFL news and conversations right here. It's the Fan Offseason Special. Here are your hosts, Jake Volnick, Darrow Ryder, and Coach Lance Reisland. We are Sports Radio 92.3 The Fan.
NFL Combine is underway in Indianapolis. Browns Executive Vice President, Football Operations, General Manager Andrew Berry, front and center, in front of reporters today. Covered a lot. And obviously, as it usually is, out in Indianapolis, the number one topic of conversation when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, the quarterback. When you're 42 deep on your roster since 1999, and you still don't have a franchise quarterback, it's going to be front and center. And Barry was asked another multitude of questions about that particular situation. The good news is, though, for Barry, it's February.
Right now, it's February 24th? We don't have to make that decision anytime soon. I think any player that we have in that room, we would expect to compete to earn a role. Those two would be no different.
And those two would be Deshaun Watson and Shedeur Sanders, which the Shedeur part, I'm good with. The Watson part makes me a little nervous, Coach, because he has not – I think he's played 19 games since he led the NFL in passing back in 2020. It's been a long time since Deshaun Watson did anything meaningful on a football field.
Well, the ripple effect, the good and bad ripple effect of Kevin Stefanski being fired is that, Monken comes in, none of the stuff that's led up to this means anything to him. So he's got to find a quarterback. When they say, competition – the quarterback position's a little bit different, especially at the NFL. The sooner they can get that done, the sooner that guy can get the reps as the guy. And as a quarterback, it's different than an offensive lineman or an old offensive lineman and a young guy trying to come up and all this different kind of stuff. That quarterback position, we talked about it last year with all four quarterbacks getting reps. Those guys need as many live reps as they can get. And live reps in the NFL, that means you get the team reps at the end of the day. You're only running between 12 and 18 literal team reps a day. So that number one guy's got to get the majority of those things. So the sooner they can do that, the better. Obviously, there's going to be a competition. And I think Deshaun Watson's in the mix if he's healthy. For me, it really comes down to his health at this point in his career. He's been beat up, coming off multiple leg injuries. That's what's made him successful. We'll see what will happen. If he's not successful, for me, it'll come down to his health. He's just been so unhealthy, and the things that he's hurt are kind of what make him, right? His shoulder, his ability to deliver the football, and his feet. So we'll see what happens. But, the number one position, at the Combine, the Underwear Olympics, I always call it, quarterback position seems to be the topic of conversation for the Cleveland Browns year in and year out.
You teed it up perfectly there, Coach. Deshaun Watson will be in the quarterback competition. Here's what Barry said about that.
I think any player on our roster we would want to compete. We believe in competition at every spot. That's no different than quarterback. Deshaun's been working really hard. He's been working his tail off. And like I said, we're excited to get going in April with all of our players across the roster because competition is something that we really believe in.
Now, they did open that 21-day window for him in December. He got to practice for 3 weeks. Then they ultimately decided to just, shut that down and not have him activated for the final couple games of the season, which, quite frankly, I felt like was the right thing to do. You give him an opportunity to get out on the practice field, see what he can do, see how he feels, and then you go into an offseason with him at least physically healthy. But I just don't know, seeing how this is the final year of his contract, where they're going to have to pay him. And before everybody loses their mind, whether it's in a couple of days or before free agency, when they do another restructure of his contract, they'll flip his salary into a signing bonus and then stretch out that cap hit over the final 3 years here, because he's going to be a post-June 1 cut next March of 2027. He'll be a post-June 1 cut, which will allow them to split the remaining cap charge on that contract over 2027 and 2028. He's officially off the books after that. I just don't know right now, Coach. I understand Andrew has to say that right now about we believe in competition. He, should have the right to compete and all that. I just don't know what benefit for the Browns there is right now when he is not your future, okay? Had he not gotten hurt, had he been on the field the last couple of years, maybe the conversation's a little different, but the facts are the facts. He's only played 19 games. He's not looked all that great in those 19 games. He's coming off of a shoulder injury, and then now not one, but two ruptured Achilles, albeit it was the same one, within a 3-month span that he had to have, he had to have it fixed, and then he had to have it fixed again. Certainly respect and appreciate everything he's done off the field to get himself physically able to at least go out and practice or whatever. I just don't know what benefit there is to even contemplate putting this dude on the field.
Well, when you have a new coach, I will say this. As a football coach, when you start thinking about the future too much, you're usually not a part of it. And so Barry can think like that. Haslam can think like that. If I'm Todd Monken right now, if I'm Switzer, if I'm the offensive staff, our goal right now is we got to figure out how to win. And if Deshaun Watson is my best quarterback right now, then I got to play him. Now, if I get told by my bosses, like in anything, like, listen, we want to move forward, but that's a really hard sell, Daryl. You have to, when you talk about culture, for me, it's not what you say, it's what you do. So if you say, hey, this guy's not a part of our future, but he's the best guy right now, then you're kind of saying, listen, and then you have those veterans. What are those veterans thinking? It's hard to keep a locker room when the best guys aren't playing. And if they know that Deshaun Watson's the best guy, they're going to want him to play. They're not worried about the future. They shouldn't be worried about week 2. They should be worried about week 1. And that's a hard thing because, as I've learned as you get in this business, you learn about the money side of it and where the money goes and what they value and things like that. But as a coach, I have to do everything I can to win. And if Deshaun Watson's my guy right now, then he plays. And if you don't want to be that guy, somebody's got to beat him out, or a guy above me has got to tell me, the guy who pays the bills has got to tell me I don't want him in there. Because for me, I'm playing the best guys.
Well, and one of the guys he's going to be competing against, Shedeur Sanders, who started the final 7 games of the season. Mixed results there. I think everyone agrees with that. Some really, really good stuff. Some really, really not so good stuff. So what would growth for Shedeur Sanders look like? Andrew Berry was asked that today as well.
Probably a better question for Todd. I think the biggest thing that we want to see from Shedeur is just continued growth. I think he grew a lot from start 1 to start 7. Play more efficiently, not putting the ball in harm's way as much, would be important. While maintaining the ability to produce out of structure and generate explosive plays. You're not going to see all of that in the upcoming months because we're not on the field. So the biggest thing that he can do is learn the new offense, get in with the coaching staff once our offseason program starts, continue to work on his body physically, and then make strides when we actually get on the grass.
Yeah, we would like to see all of that. I don't think that there was anything too revealing from that response. Basically, they want him to play better than he did in those 7.5 games.
Well, I'll say this: the thing that's not mentioned enough, and he was very impactful. And there are some, when you watch the game, that's sometimes where numbers don't tell the whole story. I thought he made some really impactful plays, but when you only have 10 to 14 possessions a game, you have to protect the football better. You cannot put it in harm's way. That's something he's really got to work on. Now, the explosives they talk about, the problem is when you go searching for explosives, sometimes that Shedeur likes to do, and these guys who are gunslingers, that's when you get into problems. It's just like taking the check down. You take the explosive when it's there. You don't force an explosive. You don't force a check down. You got to kind of go. It sounds kind of weird, but you have to let the explosives come to you when they're presented to you. That's kind of that impactful play I always talk about. You might only have 2 or 3 of those a game that you get the coverage with the guy you want in the situation you want. You got to make sure you hit those, and that's he did a little bit of that, but then he also did where he put it in harm's way, and he's got to protect the football better. That's where the growth. But you saw footwork get better. You saw some other things really improve. And once again, I just thought he had some pretty good impact on his teammates offensively.
Well, so we know there's 2 guys there. The question is not so much if they're going to add another body. I think that is that's pretty well known. The question is what type of body are they going to add to this quarterback room?
If you look into the quarterback market, as it stands now, just a couple weeks away from free agency, do you believe there's a legitimate avenue to add a quality starting quarterback, whether it be through signing or trade?
Are you talking specifically on the veteran market?
Yeah.
TBD.
That's a normal. That's a common response right there for sure.
Oh, that's a fantastic response right there from Andrew Berry. Now, as we typically do in these settings, we circle back with Andrew because the TBD just isn't going to cut it. Okay, we cannot settle for TBD. So, Andrew, are you going to add a veteran to the quarterback room this offseason? Yes or no?
I think there's always the possibility, but we have a long way to go before we get to that point. We expect to have a competitive room, like that's going to be important to us. But what that looks like, I can't exactly define that as we sit here today.
There we go. See, if you answer the question that way, out of the gate, you save us the problem of having to circle back and ask you the same question over again.
Or fill in the narrative, right? Because then now you say you have that first. We say to be announced, no one knows anything, and then you're assuming, right? And once again, I think for me, when they say those things, I think the Browns are in a position where the quarterback position, it's weird, but they have to build this offensive line first. If they don't, this quarterback talk, this receiver talk, all these tight ends, it does not matter. So they have to figure out this offensive line, then go from there. And if they want to sign a veteran, and if they're bringing in a veteran presence, well, if Deshaun Watson's healthy, he's that veteran presence. I don't know if you can, with how bad this offense is, I don't know if you can waste a pick on a quarterback. I really don't, or sign a guy. I think the money has to go to the offensive line, and you got to kind of deal with the quarterback position you have.
A situation for the Browns to monitor outside of the Malik Willis thing, because that's what we've been talking about on the station extensively. A lot of folks around the National Football League, where is he going to end up? Is it going to be Miami? Dolphins general manager John Eric Sullivan basically said today, and I'm paraphrasing, yes, Malik Willis is going to be an option for us. It should be. Their GM came from Green Bay. They came from Green Bay. It should be, right? But they're also going to be very careful when it comes to their salary cap and what they're able to do. There also another interesting nugget concerning the Arizona Cardinals. Kyler Murray and their GM Monty Ossenfort reportedly, according to reports, they have not spoken this offseason, which is really, really odd. Almost reminds me of the Baker Mayfield situation in 2022. The Browns kept reaching out to Baker. Baker wasn't returning calls, and that ultimately kind of one thing led to another that offseason, and we got stuck with Deshaun Watson. So those are two guys that I think obviously Browns fan are going to want to pay attention to as we get closer to free agency. You mentioned, and you got my ears up when you said you don't know if drafting a quarterback this year makes a lot of sense for the Browns. Andrew Berry had thoughts on that. We're going to get into that next. Should they add yet another young player to this quarterback room? Yes or no? Andrew Berry's going to tell us next. It's Daryl Ryder and Lance Risland with you till 9, the Offseason Special, each and every Tuesday, 7 to 9, right here on The Fan.
real-time sports news every 20 minutes from the University Hospital's sports desk. We are Sports Radio 92.3 The Fan. Catch all the latest Browns and NFL news and conversations right here. It's the Fan Offseason Special. Here are your hosts, Jake Volnick, Darrow Ryder, and Coach Lance Reisland. We are Sports Radio 92.3 The Fan.
Jake Volnick on assignment tonight, so it's just Darrow Ryder and Lance Reisland with you till 9, as we are each and every Tuesday, 7 to 9 p.m., the Browns off-season special right here on 92.3 The Fan, streaming on YouTube as well, and the free Odyssey app. Before we took our last time out there, Coach Riz, we were contemplating options to add in the Browns quarterback room. And one of those options is the NFL draft. Of course, last year, the Browns selected Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round. They selected Dillon Gabriel in the 3rd round. Dillon Gabriel, not so good. Shedeur Sanders, sometimes good, sometimes bad. That's what they got out of that. We heard from Andrew Berry as far as what they're hoping for to see from Shedeur in the growth standpoint. It just kind of feels like right now Dillon Gabriel's the afterthought, right? It just because it just wasn't good. You're not a fan of the Browns drafting a quarterback, and I'm going to explore that this segment. Andrew Berry, thoughts on using one of his 10 draft picks on yet another quarterback?
I don't see a problem with
That's it. Just Andrew Berry to a T right there.
And so let's again. We'd like a little more expansion on that thought there, Andrew. Why don't you see a problem with that?
It's the most important position. We wouldn't talk about it any differently if we were drafting an O lineman or a D lineman or something along those lines. I don't think that you can invest in it enough. I wouldn't put any restraint on it.
Okay, so there you again. See, if you're a little more expansive in your answer, we don't have to circle back. That's how these press conferences work. See, when we don't get the answer we're looking for, or it's a very short answer, we got to circle back to that. And so you're not a fan of using one of the 10 draft picks on a quarterback this year. Why is that?
Well, I think, first of all, I think Shedeur did enough in those 7.5 games to kind of, to see what he can do if you have an offensive line, if you can rebuild that offensive line, if you can go out and get some skill guys. Does Harold Fannin get even better? Does Judkins come back healthy? Once again, now everybody, the Dillon Gabriel, obviously I'm higher on him than others, but he could also be a guy in that room when you talk about being a backup or a guy who, that's important too. Most quarterback, you're going to play 2 quarterbacks at least in the NFL for the most part. And then you have Deshaun Watson. And the reason I say that is because I think it's a pretty deep draft at receiver. I think it's a pretty deep draft of what they need at tackle. I think there's some interior guys. I think it's a really deep draft at tight end for what they need. Guys, hand on the ground, flex. Monken likes to be in 12 personnel as well. So I just think the needs are too great outside of that quarterback position. And then, for me, I kind of look at it, all right, if you can build this offensive line and you can get some skill guys, then if you evaluate and you say, you know what, these aren't the guys, then you have a good foundation if you have to go out the following year and get a quarterback. But for me, I think the guys did enough. I still would like to, for me, Dillon Gabriel could be the odd man out because I do think as much as the system that Kevin ran, people don't like it because it's system-based. I think that's what can make Dillon successful. And I'm not sure, a more players-based offense that they're getting now, that's going to be a little bit more difficult for Dillon. And I'm high on Dillon. I still think Dillon has a place in the NFL. But I think what Deshaun did, getting here, and then what Shedeur did in those 7 games, I think you got to build around it and see what happens. And I just don't know if you can waste a pick on another quarterback in the later rounds who is a developmental guy.
I just really hope that Dillon's NFL future is anywhere but Cleveland. That's just where I'm at right now. After watching what I did in the offseason, then watching what I did in those 5-6 games that he started, I've seen enough. I'm good. At least with Shedeur, to your point, you did see some growth. And I will agree with Andrew Berry in that from start 1 to start 7, you did see a better player. And I think that part of that came with just the going through the experience of it for him. And so I do feel like it's fair to anticipate he's going to be a better player this year because he's gone through a year. He knows what's expected of him, which I don't think he was prepared for properly when he was in college. He has an understanding of what the week-to-week preparation is like. I think he has an understanding of what he needs to do in the offseason. He can wipe the slate clean. Kevin is out of here. Now it's Todd Monken that's in here. It's system over players instead of players for the system, which I think could help him as well. I have said that the Todd Monken hire, even though I'm not doing cartwheels over it, considering and look, I wasn't going to do cartwheels over any of the coaches, the coaching candidates out there that they were going to hire. I was I think I was pretty clear throughout the whole process. I'm like, yeah, whatever. Whoever they hire is who they hire, and let's just see how it plays out. Because there wasn't, for me, that one guy that the Browns had to have. So, I think Todd Monken can be successful, depending on the organizational support that he gets, the input that he's able to have. But when you look at this rookie class, it's, Fernando Mendoza is going to go number one. I think that everyone is set on that. I am not a big fan of Heisman Trophy winners. The track record just is not good in the National Football League. But that doesn't mean he can't be successful. He at least has the physical tools. He's got the physical stature. He's the prototypical quarterback when it comes to size. He's got the arm strength. He's got enough mobility to do some things. But Ty Simpson, quarterback from Alabama, not crazy about Drew Aller, even though he's a local kid. Love him dearly. I just don't want to wish the Browns on him. I hate the local kid thing because there's so much that comes with being a Browns quarterback that the local thing being on top of it, of like, hey, local kid, now it's your job to save the franchise. I just think that's too much for them. And I'm not sold that Aller's ready for the NFL. Sellers, Nussmeier, we thought that this was going to be like the big class, right, for quarterbacks. That's not materialized
yet.
Here's what Andrew Berry had to say, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Coach. Here's what Andrew Berry had to say about this rookie class of quarterbacks, which, again, on record today, and I realize not sworn testimony, he has no problem drafting one of these kids. Here's what he had to say about this rookie quarterback class and the quality of it.
TBD. It's, we're in maybe a little bit of a different position, a little bit of a different class. We're not picking 2, although we are picking 6. I think the quarterback class is different, than it was in terms of, when guys may go off the board. But needless to say, we will devote a lot of time to the passers like we do every year.
He's going to invest a lot. To me, I think that's his way of saying this class isn't that good. It's not as good as last year's class.
Well, for me, once again, I hate to be the guy who says we got to wait, but the quarterback position is one of those positions I've been as wrong as anybody else over the last 4 or 5 years. In fact, I've been wrong even before I started.
You love Dylan Gabriel.
I did, and I still do, and I still think there's a place for him. But once again, if you think about what Dylan brought to the table, that's that factor that we don't know, because when you break down what Dylan does well and what Kevin's offense was, there's a match there. It didn't work. Now, that doesn't always mean it didn't work, and that's okay. That's but I didn't have Lamar Jackson. I didn't think he would be what he is. I didn't think Josh Allen was going to be what he is. So that it factor kind of plays that's the hard measurable part. That's why we get these quarterbacks wrong. And for me, like the one thing that sticks out, like Ty Simpson, I can't get over the 15 starts, right? Because that's Bill Parcells. That's a huge one for me, because these guys who come in, Trubisky, these guys who don't have a lot of college starts, they just don't see a lot of football. Garrett Nussmeier is a guy I'm a lot higher on. I think Garrett Nussmeier is closer to Mendoza than anybody because of his father and because he's grown up with the game of football. And he had a tough year, but it wasn't all him, part him. But I think Nussmeier's got a chance. I think he could be around maybe later rounds if that's where the Browns want to go. Drew Aller's a project. Cole Payton, the kid out of North Dakota State, it's a project. Then there's guys like Sawyer Robinson, who is a guy out of Baylor who will be around day 3. He's got all the physical tools, but as we know, sometimes the physical tools doesn't mean you're going to be successful either. So it's a crapshoot with quarterback. I think what they have and what they don't have tends me to say, don't pick a quarterback and let's build that offensive line, skill guys, get a safety if you can. There's some good safeties in the draft late day 2 into day 3, and roll the dice and see what happens.
Did they make a mistake by drafting 2 projects last year? Because Dylan Gabriel was a project, Shedeur Sanders was a project. Whoever they draft this year is going to be a project. Is there such a thing as having too many projects in that room?
Well, for me, it speaks to the alignment issue that you and I have talked about over the last number of months. Who picked who, right? It seemed like there was different. Once again, we don't know, but Kevin seemed to like Dylan. Other people liked Shedeur. That's alignment issue. So I don't know. Did they just kind of say, "Listen, we're going to go out and get both of these guys"? Because I think it kind of set them both up for failure, right? We automatically had these opinions on both, and I don't think it was fair to either of them, to be honest with you. And when you say competition, I always think about, even though I like Dylan, I don't think Shedeur got much of a look early on. So I don't know if it was real competition. If you're going to say competition, strap it up and let's have competition then. So I don't know if having 2 guys was the right move, but to me, Daryl speaks of their lack of alignment right now from the top. From the owner to the GM to the coach to everybody involved. If that's not aligned, that's what you get. You get these kind of hodgepodge things. And no, I didn't like it at all, because I think it set them both up for, being criticized unfairly, unfortunately.
They say if you have two or more quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. And you pretty much, I think that's true at a lot of positions, but especially under center. It started with I hate saying it was a 4-man quarterback competition last year, because it really wasn't. Now, I have to say it was a 4-man competition because that's how the organization described it, and so I kind of have to let the facts of their view of it get in the way of my view of it a little bit. I really felt it was a 3-man competition. I don't think Shedeur Sanders had a snowball's chance, and where of winning that job, especially when you see him during training camp and he's throwing reps to ball boys, okay? And part of the reason why is because, frankly, they ran out of wide receivers to throw balls to, is they were doing the drills going up and down the field. How they typically do it is when they're throwing on air, they line all the wide receivers up, the quarterbacks will rotate, throwing to the left, and then the other guy throws to the right, and then the next guy comes in, throws back to the left, next guy comes in, throws back to the right. Not to get too in the weeds there, but that's kind of like what it looks like. And by the time Shedeur's time came up, all the quarterbacks had been, or all the wide receivers had been spent, and so the ball boys had to go out run out and run the routes for him. So he had somebody to throw footballs to, and that's not being involved in a quarterback competition. Also, he never got first-team reps in practice at all, and you can't say you have a competition when you're not giving your guy reps. It really worries me that we're going to do this again this year. Does it worry you? We are in store for another more than 2, because it's not going to be just Shedeur v. Deshaun. It could be Shedeur v. Deshaun v. Dylan Gabriel again, plus another guy. Does it worry you we could be in store for another 3 to 4-man quarterback competition?
Well, I think, obviously what you got last year, especially early on, tells you can't do that. And I think, obviously, Todd Monken being 6 years old and being an offensive guy who's really knowledgeable and gets the most out of his offensive players because he is a players over plays guy, I think that would be part of his interview, because I know it would be for me. I would be like, I'm going to do this quarterback competition the way I would like to do it. And for me, that's getting the guys who I think, early on, especially early on in practice, you can get multiple reps with guys. Then you got to go with the guys you think are going to be the guys. And if you're going to be one of those guys, you got to be really good in early practice, kind of like at all levels of football. So, no, I don't think with Todd Monken, I would hope not. I would hope that was part of his it was not really productive last year. It didn't work out. I understand what they did, and I do appreciate, as we watched every day, they were trying to get the reps. It just kind of minimized it. It made it too thin. And then you get to games, and there wasn't enough live reps, live bullets, and you saw that. And even with Joe Flacco, everybody's saying, well, he didn't need the reps. Yes, he does. You need live reps. If you're playing in the NFL, you need live reps. I don't care if you've been in the NFL for 20 years. You need those live reps, and he didn't get them, and he struggled because of it. So it affected all of them. That's why, another reason, I don't think they should go out, and they need a couple camp arms, but they don't need a guy who's in this competition because they have 3 guys that are going to be fighting for it.
Yeah, and if you're going to have Deshaun Watson, if you're truly contemplating him being in on a competition, He needs the reps because he hasn't had many
Absolutely.
recently. Okay, 1 hour down, one more to go. There's a new face in Brownstown. We'll tell you who that is and get some thoughts from Andrew Berry on that. And also, too, could one of the guys that helped them land Todd Monken be standing around? It's Daryl Ryder, Lance Reisland, Jake Volnick's on assignment tonight. The Browns offseason special right here on The Fan.
of the worst sports movies I've ever seen.
I don't know if it's that bad, but we'll tell you the athletes that I would not talk to when I had to work with them. It's the Emerging Podcast Scene, presented by Extend Technologies on the free Odyssey app.
Catch all the latest Browns and NFL news and conversations right here. It's the Fan Offseason Special. Here are your hosts, Jake Volnick, Darrow Ryder, and Coach Lance Reisland. We are Sports Radio 92.3 The Fan.
Hour number 2 of the Browns offseason special. Jake Volnick is on assignment tonight. Darrow Ryder, Coach Riz with you till 9. A very busy day in Brownstown. Executive Vice President and General Manager Andrew Berry held court in Indianapolis. His press conference plus the sidebar. We have been covering everything that Berry had been asked to cover. Last hour, we touched on the youth of the roster and Berry's belief that does not mean that they're going to be a bad football team. We did see last year, although they were young and they were bad, the young players were productive. So there is something there to hang your hat on as far as looking forward to this year. We also learned from Andrew Berry that they're going to be more aggressive than they were last year in free agency, but they're going to be even more aggressive next year in free agency. And then also he clarified the whole interview process with the essays and that. Like we were talking about, Coach, it'd be nice if they just explain themselves when these brush fires pop up, because it creates things that are completely unnecessary. It creates narratives that are unnecessary and unfair, and gives me material that I get to use for weeks at a time. And then, now I can't make essay jokes anymore because, well, how Andrew explained it kind of totally made sense. But we got a new face added to the Cleveland Browns. Dom Capers, the former Carolina Panthers head coach, who I think is like 75 now. He's joining the organization. I guess he's going to be a senior defensive assistant. Here's what Andrew Berry had to say about the addition of the very experienced and up there in age, Dom Capers.
Rudy worked with him in Jacksonville, but Dom, obviously he's super well respected. He's a really good coach. He's an awesome human being. So we're excited to have him.
So what is the benefit of, bringing in guys like Dom Capers to a coaching staff that, first of all, the defensive staff pretty much is, for the most part, staying intact outside of the coordinator. Offensively, different scenario. Some of those assistants are sticking around, but, a lot of rebuild there. But just what do you think Dom Capers is going to be able to add for the Browns as a senior assistant coach?
Well, Rutenberg's a guy, when you get your first job, the thing is that at every level of football, but I can just imagine this guy has paid his dues. So he's going to come in with his hair on fire. And sometimes when you come in with your hair on fire, you overdo things. You overanalyze things. You're super hyper-focused, attention to detail. What Capers will do is he's been around long enough to say, all right, this is how, first of all, let's map out from now until the end of the season. Let's map out, what we're going to do in practice. Let's map out how we're going to practice on our work days. How we're going to practice on a short week. What if we get in the playoffs? What does that practice schedule look like? I'm sorry, did you just say? Yeah, I did. I never lose a game before I play it, Darryl, ever. You know that. And then
you said the P word.
So, but all those things, right? Everything that goes into recovery and how do you rest the veterans, because this is all new to Rutenberg. So you got a guy like Myles Garrett. Does he need a day off during the week? Denzel Ward.
Well, Myles Garrett's going to run his own practice schedule. He's going to tell them when he's going to practice.
So all those kind of things. But in terms of how do you even that though? How do you work with a superstar? How do you work with, if a superstar is kind of a diva or if he's not a diva, or how do you protect a guy from himself? Some guys, there's guys that love, Joe Patonio, watch him practice. He practices like a rookie every time he's a guy who really he loves football. So protecting those guys from himself. It's just a day-to-day operation of the experience of a head coach who understands these are grown men who are big, violent. How do you rest them? How do you not rest them? How do you create locker room? How do you create chemistry? How do you do these things? And really the only way you know how to do that is if you've done it. It doesn't mean you can't. It doesn't mean Rutenberg won't be really good at it, but he doesn't know how to do it right now. So it's nice to have a guy who can say, you're 0-3. as a young coach, you might go, we're going to practice and we're doing everything. We're going to go live. And Capers going to come in and say, that's not really the way. Here's how I think. Here's another option. Not that you have to, but let me tell you how I would handle it, because I've been here before. I've been 0-3 or I've been 2-1 or whatever it is. So just having a guy who's been there just to bounce stuff off of is very important.
We're going to hear from Todd Monken tomorrow in Indianapolis at 1 o'clock. We'll have that for you here on 92.3 The Fan from the Combine. During his introductory press conference, Monken said system stays the same. He came here for the players. He didn't come here for Jim Schwartz. With Rutenberg stepping in now, let's be honest about it. It's not going to be kept the same. There's going to be tweaks to this thing. Where do you think Capers fits into that part of the equation in trying to marry what the existing defensive staff did, right? They promote Tarver, they promote Bander, which, by the way, Tarver and Bander might be here for one more, like this season. Next year, both of them, when we go through the hire cycles, they both could and probably should become defensive coordinators. The team sniffed around them this year, but how do you think that will play out with Capers' involvement there, maybe trying to marry what Rutenberg, his vision, right, and trying to marry it with the existing staff of, hey, this is kind of how we did things, and I know Jim's not here anymore, but the way we did things worked really, really, really well. Maybe we don't want to upset the apple cart too much.
Well, that's what Capers will say. It's not coming in and change everything. It's what have you done successful and how can I add to it, because I do have to put my own stamp on it. And you said it best. If you and I run the same scheme, it's going to change on game day. It's going to change because how do you handle third and medium? How do you handle goal line, red zone? All those things, those are situational game things that are done by a coach, and everybody's going to be a little different. I think what Capers can do is say, hey, the philosophy, so where the scheme will be similar, the philosophy stays the same. One gap penetrating defensive lineman, linebackers play downhill, a lot of man coverage, maybe a little bit more disguised, but that philosophy of being aggressive, not being passive, not letting the offense dictate, not being reactive, right? Being proactive. I think those are things that when they say the scheme will stay the same, it'll be a 4-down lineman in front. So Miles isn't lined up somewhere defense. Graham will be at the 3 technique or the 2-eye. Malik, they'll be in the same kind of spots, right, on the field. They'll have the same responsibilities, the same gap responsibilities, run responsibilities. But there's going to be a little bit of difference. But the philosophy, I think, is what the players want. The philosophy, this is what was good for us. Attacking was good for us. This is what Bush does well. This is what Tyson Campbell does well. So I think that's what the Capers will say. Hey, don't go away from, don't change it. You didn't get hired defensively because the defense was poor. There's a difference. Sometimes you get hired, you have to change everything. This is one of those unique situations. You come in, that side of the ball, you came into a gold mine. Don't change too much, but put your own stamp on it. And they need to know that you're putting your own stamp on it, because that tells those players you're in control too.
Former Chargers and Raiders GM Tom Telesco was brought in on a consulting basis to help the Browns through the coaching search, which got a lot of headlines with how the Browns conducted said coaching search. It took them 24 frickin' days to settle on Todd Monken.
We had a lot of these, but
yes.
We had a lot of these talking about who the coach is going to be.
Who will it be now? And look, I say that tongue in cheek, but and part of it was because they needed to wait to talk to Nate Shieldhouse because he wasn't available. Because unlike the Browns, the Rams participate in the playoffs, and so Telesco now, where he fits with this organization. Barry was asked if he's going to be sticking around beyond just the coaching search.
He is not, but I think you guys have seen him around the facility and everything like that. He was my first boss. I love Tom. He helped us out, but nothing, not formal, but we'll see. Listen, I'd love to have Tom. I'm going to use Tom as often as I can.
So basically, it sounds to me like a very informal thing. Tom's just going to kind of hang out with us. We're flirting, we're dating, but we're not committed to each other. He helped out a little bit with the coaching thing. I don't know. Does Andrew Berry need a little extra help in the front office, do you think?
Once again, it's the idea of what they're doing. They do things differently. And we all know that.
Yes, they do things differently.
So when you do things differently and you're not successful, which they have not been, sometimes they can be critiqued. So bringing in help, and I think a lot of that, like you said, I think a lot of it has to do with they don't explain it to everyone, so we write our own narratives, like we said. So I do think having as much help as possible, a guy you work for, making sure that you're doing the best for the organization. And sometimes you have to do, sometimes that's not good for you. The Browns have to be the focus, and the focus has to be, he has to do his job, and he has to make sure that Todd Monken is focused on winning games. Those things need to be separated, I think, a little bit here in Cleveland. And I think that would help them. Right. That they're not, sometimes not always being like-minded helps. It's okay to have different views. It's okay to say, we want this guy, and Todd Monken go, no, I want this guy. That's okay to do that. It doesn't mean that it can't be professional, but having yes guys
doesn't mean you're dysfunctional.
Yeah, having yes guys all the time doesn't help you grow sometimes. So I think if you can making sure that you have people that are going to tell you honestly what they think, because everything that you've done, as much confidence you haven't had a ton of success with it. So they got to change it up a little bit.
Browns a little tight on the salary cap, thanks a lot to Deshaun Watson. It's not going to be a problem. Salary cap's a myth, at least when Andrew Berry's in charge. Here's Berry on the cap.
Andrew, how would you characterize the cap situation as you guys get ready for next month?
Good.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to redo Deshaun's number, is that right?
We'll see.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and yes, they're going to redo Deshaun. Restructure. They're going to convert his $46 million salary into a signing bonus, so it'll be about 44.5 because I think the veteran minimum's like 1.3, 1.5, something like that. And they're going to spread that down the road over 27 in 28 when they make him a post June 1 cut. Once again, Andrew Berry, thorough as always, very transparent as always. You know what? I think Andrew... I'm going to steal a line. Andrew Berry is the most transparent general manager the Browns have ever had. Coming up next, the offensive line. I know this is your favorite thing to talk about, Coach Riz. Andrew Berry had a lot to say about the offensive line situation and the reconstruction project he has on his hands this offseason. It's the Browns Offseason Special. Daryl Ryder, Lance Reisland, Jake Volnick's on assignment tonight with you till 9 here on The Fan.
This is the only place to trust for Cavs talk anytime you want. Cleveland's Sports Radio, 92.3 The Fan. Catch all the latest Browns and NFL news and conversations right here. It's the Fan Offseason Special. Here are your hosts, Jake Volnick, Darrow Ryder, and Coach Lance Reisland. We are Sports Radio 92.3 The Fan.
Rolling along on a Tuesday evening with you till 9, as we are each and every Tuesday. Of course, I am brought to you by Scheiben Jewelers, Cleveland's premier jewelry store. The offensive line is an area in which that Andrew Berry is going to find himself very busy this offseason with some duct tape, some string, maybe a little bail, trying to put this whole thing back together. It starts with Joel Bitonio, though. We had Wyatt Teller already, like David Njoku, pop on the social media there and say bye-bye to Cleveland, not going to be back. They bumped the void date in Joel Bitonio's contract to March 10th, and they did that so that Joel had a few extra weeks here to contemplate whether or not he's going to return. I kind of feel like the longer this goes, the odds increase that Joel will come back. So where do things stand? Andrew Berry asked about that today in Indianapolis.
Joel's still working through that. At this point in his career and this point in his life, he deserves the time and space to do that. Stay in regular communications, and we'll work through that at the appropriate time.
I love Joel Bitonio. I don't know what he's thinking about coming back. You got to learn a whole new system. Okay, he did play for Coach Warhop, so there'll be some familiarity there, but why would you want to do this to yourself again? The Browns are not going to be contenders this year. Yes, they should be a better football team than they were last year. But I love Joel, and selfishly, I hope he's back. I just don't know why he really wants to do this again.
Well, some guys love football, and it really comes down to that. Obviously, he's got the money he needs, all that kind of stuff. But some guys just love football, and I'll tell you what, I think Warhop coming in here gives him the best opportunity more than anything else, because Warhop, like Callahan, is a why guy. And people always say, what does that mean, Coach? And it means when they go out to practice, they're not just hitting each other. They're communicating in terms of I'm going to hit this guy against the forefront, not to get into the woods, but basically this is going to happen. And Callahan would say, the linebacker is going to do this, and the safety is going to do this. And those guys, especially veterans, they love to hear that, because as physical as Callahan was, when I watched him every day, that's what stood out to me is the teaching. And that's what Warhop's going to bring. These veteran guys, that's what he's going to bring in. And I think that will really help. If Joel's going to stay, Warhop's going to be a big reason because of kind of the philosophy he's going to run. And, the new system it is. You're down blocking, you're pulling. He's a veteran enough to that won't bother him too much, because there's only so many schemes you can run. The idea of, is there a 1-2, and whether they're contenders or not does not change. Do you prepare to be a contender? That's important for a guy like Joel Bitonio, because never lose a game before you play it. And, obviously they haven't been successful, but are you doing the things to be successful? Because it doesn't mean you're going to eat, but you're not at the table, you can't eat. And I think that's what the staff hopefully will bring to these guys, is the ability to be in every game with a chance to win.
The Chicago Bears last offseason rebuilt their offensive line, and it worked out pretty good for them. Things went well. And so Barry is going to try and replicate that here. So it can be done. It can be done successfully. The Baltimore Ravens are another team that you can look at when you're talking about rebuilding an offensive line. Here's what Barry had to say about the Dirty Birds and how they do things in Baltimore.
You could look no further than Baltimore. If you go, from, left to right on their O-line, you had Ronnie Stanley. Obviously, he had been one of the better left tackles in the game. At left guard, you had a combination between Andrew Voorhees, who was more of a strength-related player, and Emory Jones, who was a rookie. Tyler Lindenbaum, who was an athletic-style center. Daniel Falele, who was, like human orca big, really big power player, that type of thing. And then Roger Rosengarten, who was, more of your athletic-style player. So, I don't think that there's necessarily just a universal commonality, but they have to have enough of everything to be scheme versatile.
And the last part of that, the last sentence he said, scheme versatile. And that goes back to a lot of like what we've been talking about when it comes to the hire of Todd Monken, in the fact that he's not a system guy. He can run a system, but he's not a system guy. When you hear Andrew Berry talk about scheme versatile when it comes to offensive linemen, translate that for the fans. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Well, let's start with Joe Bitonio. So Joe Bitonio at his peak, him and Wyatt Teller, you see them out in front. If you remember Nick Chubb always having those long runs, usually with Joe Bitonio pulling around. So a lot of gap scheme. And that gap scheme basically means one side is blocking down inside, and they're going to pull some guys from the other side. It's a very simple, very aggressive scheme. And then those double teams on the wide zone where you're double teaming and getting to the second level. Those scheme versatile things, it just means you're going to maximize not just skill receivers and running backs and quarterbacks. You're going to maximize what Joe Bitonio does best. You're going to maximize what DeJuan Jones does best. DeJuan Jones is not a super physical guy, even though he's big, but he's pretty athletic. So maximize what these guys do well. Don't make, this is Jenkins, for example. There's a guy, KT Levinston, even though at tackle he's a turnstile, he can play guard. And I stand by that because you're in a booth. So
he can run block. He can't pass block.
Correct. But he can pass block inside because there's very little movement inside there, at guard. Or he could be better. Let's rephrase that. But at least he can be maybe a functional role player in the right spot. So I think what it means is you're putting these guys in positions to do what they do best, whether they pull, down block, Mike block, get to the second level, whatever they're going to do. He's going to allow them to do it because, once again, he's not a scheme guy. He's a week-to-week guy. So if they're facing the Browns like he did when he was with the Ravens, they trapped the Browns because they knew the Browns would be upfield. They made the Browns cover with linebackers and safeties instead of the good corners. So it's a week-to-week thing, not just for the skill guys, but for the offensive linemen as well. And they like that because they know they won't be KT Levinson's not going to be out there by himself at right tackle to get killed. That won't happen.
Well, we think.
We hope not. Well, that's exactly right. That would be the thought process about a players over plays or a players over scheme type system.
Andrew Berry also said something today that I know is going to drive you nuts. We're talking about scheme versatile linemen that he's going to be looking for. And here's what he had to say when it came to scouting offensive linemen.
I'd like to give you the general answer that, because usually when people say that those are stereotypes, I actually think that that's one where there is some truth to it, to be frank. That's not the case everywhere. It shouldn't be a blanking statement for all college offensive linemen because there are a number of schools that do a really nice job of it. But I do think, as I think about where that group was coming out, let's say now versus, when I first started scouting in the NFL, I do think that there is a difference.
It's a little harder scouting the linemen than maybe in years past. I mean, I think I understand where he's coming from. Just, I hate to be like the old man traditionalist and all that, because I understand you have to adapt or die. Times change. You have to be willing to move with the times, and you can't be stuck in your ways. You can't be stuck in a system. I really detest the state of college football when it comes to the young players and their preparations for the National Football League. I kind of feel like Shedeur Sanders is Exhibit A of that. College coaches will tell you, hey, it's not my job to develop guys for the NFL. My job is to win for my university, win the conference win the conference championship, get to the college football playoff, compete for a national championship. That's my job. Get the best possible players and put them in position to win now for me here in college. They make it to the NFL, God bless them. That goes on my resume. I can say, hey, so-and-so, and I can list all the guys that I coached that got to the NFL, but that's not their main priority. And I think that the transfer portal, the NIL, and look, I'm all for the college kids getting their piece of the pie. Billions with a B of dollars are being made by these universities with the television and media contracts and all that. And none of that is going toward lowering the cost of education at those institutions, okay? It's going towards stadium renovations, fancy new locker rooms, and all this other kind of stuff, which a lot of these buildings frankly need, but I don't know that you need to be redoing the locker room every 3 to 4 years either. So I'm all for, if you're selling players' jerseys in the school bookstore, the players should get a piece of that pie. You're making money off of his name, image, and likeness, and you might say, well, they're getting a scholarship out of it, but the financial value of that scholarship is nowhere near equal to the financial value they're providing to that university. All that being said, I just think that the college football landscape right now, Coach, complicates the scouting process because they're not staying at the same school. They're not staying with the same coaches. They're not staying in the same systems and all that kind of stuff. I just think it's muddying the waters. Am I completely backwards in my thinking? What is your take when you hear Andrew Berry kind of talk about, hey, some schools do it better than others, but it's not as easy today when it comes to scouting, especially those offensive linemen, because there's just so much player and coach movement in the college game these days?
Well, actually, I didn't like the comment, and I'm going to push back on Andrew Berry because here's why. He's a numbers-based guy. They're analytics, right? So everything they do is based on numbers. And I think that's why they've had some success with DBs because the numbers mean a lot with DBs, right? The arm length, the ability, the hip movement, all that stuff, it all matters. But when you're an offensive lineman, let's start with the offensive lineman, him saying they're hard to evaluate. Well, offensive linemen are different. Now, you have to have size, right? You have to be 6'4" to 6'7", all those things. We understand that as people who are in this business, these are big humans. But there is a football aspect that Barry and the analytics type of people, the lack of feel, that's what really hurts them. So they struggle with offensive linemen because Tristan Wirfs is a great example when they took Jed Wills. Jed Wills fits what the Browns like, and on paper, he's outstanding. He's long. He can move his feet, but there's not a lot of want-to, right? And we watch.
You don't need to tell me. I saw it for 4 years.
Yeah, I watched. So when you watch him, they're now when he does make a play, you see all the talent in the world because he does have those skills. So when they're going to evaluate a guy and they meet the numbers, sometimes you look past, this guy's a wrestler, which for me is one of the keys for an offensive lineman because they're mean and it's hard to wrestle. And then you look at his balance and basically that want-to. Does that guy love playing football? Because as an offensive lineman, it's the most thankless job there is. And that's where the numbers don't match up when they're evaluating these guys is that, the numbers mean something, no doubt, but watch that guy. How did he finish blocks? When the play's away, how does he play? How does he talk to you? Does he love the football? Does he love the game? Does he understand fronts? Or is he an NIL guy who loves the money, and which is rightfully so. But the offensive line is such a hard position, and evaluation really has to start away from the numbers. It has to start away from the measurements because those are given. It has to start with, does this guy love playing football? Is he nasty in the run game? Does he like to knock people back? All those things, those don't, that's not how the Browns operate. And that's why I think it makes it tough for them to evaluate the offensive linemen. And that's how that's going to be a position. But that's also why they've hit on some DBs because that means a lot more when you're looking at DBs, Emerson's length and things like that. Offensive lineman, you got to go inside out. And does that guy eat, breathe? Does he not, you don't want him to be nice. They shouldn't be everybody's friend. They're not real. So it's a weird thing. But offensive linemen are like wrestlers. They are tough humans, and you got to find those guys much past the numbers.
The human element,
Correct.
I think, is the unquantifiable thing that continues to elude Andrew Berry. And Exhibit A of that, the Jim Schwartz situation.
Correct.
Totally misread the room. Could we have a repeat of last year? Ominous sign from Andrew Berry. We're going to get into that next as the Browns offseason special continues. Daryl Ryder, Lance Reisland, Jake Volnick's on assignment. We're with you till 9 right here on The Fan.
Browns, we're the station you turn to first. 92.3 The Fan is Cleveland's home for breaking sports news. Your teams, your station. Catch all the latest Browns and NFL news and conversations right here. It's the Fan Offseason Special. Here are your hosts, Jake Volnick, Darrow Ryder, and Coach Lance Reisland. We are Sports Radio 92.3 The Fan.
Back with you on the Browns offseason special. Jake Volnick is on assignment tonight. It's Darrow Ryder and Coach Riz with you. Big day out at the Combine in Indianapolis is, we like to call it, the Underwear Olympics. Everyone's going to get excited about them verticals, them shuttles, them 40-yard dashes, them quarterbacks throwing on air, those that are actually going to throw, and the receivers making all those fancy one-handed catches in shirts and shorts. It is the greatest time to be alive. Leading up to the NFL draft, if I sounded just a little sarcastic and cynical there, good. It was meant to be that way. Andrew Berry spoke today. We have been kind of breaking down a lot of his comments as he met with the reporters, the podium press conference, and, of course, afterwards, the sidebar. And obviously, we know how last year played out, Coach Riz, with them trading down from number 2. Now, I'm going to pay real close attention to what Barry has to say between now and the NFL draft. If there is a single player that he just goes out of his way to praise, I am going to assume they have pawned that player off on somebody. Because here's why. So last year leading up, this was during his pre-draft press conference that he holds. It's usually about a week before the draft. He just absolutely just slobbered all over Travis Hunter. Come to find out, after they traded the pick to Jacksonville, Jaguars took him 2, Browns dropped to 5. They took Mason Graham. They also collected the Jaguars' 2026 first-round pick, which ultimately ended up being the 24th pick because Jacksonville made the playoffs this year. We came to find out that they had agreed 2 weeks before the draft to that trade. And the reason they agreed to that trade is because Jacksonville wanted Travis Hunter. And so Andrew Berry, sang Travis Hunter's praise as if to say, Jacksonville, you made a very, very good trade agreement with me that we're going to announce before we go on the clock or as we go on the clock during the draft. Now, I bring all of this up. It's different this year. And instead of being number 2, the Browns have the number 6 pick. But Andrew Berry reminded us all, the phone is always charged. The phone is always on.
More generally with trades, I think you guys know I'm always super active, and part of your job is to listen.
He does listen. He does answer a lot of calls, and as we have seen over these last 6 years, he is not afraid to pull the trigger when it comes to whether the big trade, whether it's like an Amari Cooper or a Jerry Jeudy trade or the second pick in the NFL draft. He loves to wheel and deal, and I kind of feel like he's setting us up for a little more wheeling and dealing this offseason.
Well, it's going to be interesting because I've been on record, and there's some guys in this draft defensively, Arvell Reese, Ruben Bain, Caleb Downs. There's guys who might be available at 6 that are the best players in the draft, in my opinion. And how do you say to yourself, how do you not pick those guys if they're available? Because for me, you don't fill holes with picks, you fill holes with free agency. Then you go out, then maybe you're right. Maybe they trade back because...
You mean the picks are the foundation of your team, the free agency, that's for me, the window dressing.
Correct. That's okay. Because you win with elite players. And if you're filling holes, sometimes you fill need. They're good players, but they're not game changers. There's 3 defensive players for me that are game changers in this draft. And if they're available, then I think you got to take them. But
so your team defense at 6, you'll have no problem with that.
No, and here's the thing, though. I don't think anybody would if the Browns' offense wasn't where it was. I think me included. This offense was so bad, you say to yourself, we got to have offense, we got to have offense, we got to have offense. No, you got to have great players. And you should never have your offense be in a position where it's historically bad that you go, I don't care what happens, I'm taking offense. And then you're maybe passing on guys because of where the offense is at. So I can see them trading back maybe because other people probably see those guys the same way. And then if you think you're going to get an offensive guy, there's going to be a couple offensive guys who are at the top of your list that are not ahead of those defensive guys. So I'm with you. I'm very interested to see how this plays out because passing on a guy like Caleb Downs, I don't care where you're at, that just doesn't make sense to me.
It's funny you should mention the whole trading down thing. That did come up.
If you move down from 6, would it be small or
What am I going to get for it? It really depends. Yeah,
you're open to it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. What am I going to get for it? Depends. I feel like that if he moves down, he's going to want a 27 first-round pick to do it. Because of the quarterback situation being what it is, what it's projected to be for next year's draft, right? I think one of the challenges, well, there are many challenges when it comes to the Browns, but one of the challenges, Coach, they have to deal with is that they have so many holes that they need to fill, but the problem is they still have the largest one of them all, and that's the quarterback, but they're not going to be able to outbid the Jets. The Jets are loaded with draft capital after their deadline fire sale. As one of their writers put it at the time, the Jets just traded all their best players that they spent their most recent top picks on for top picks in future drafts, right? And so I don't obviously I don't foresee Barry trading top players for future picks. I feel like he's going to build upon like what is already here because you're not in a position where you want to create even more holes because you have enough of them. But I kind of feel like the Browns staying at 6 that's not a guarantee right now. I really feel like Barry is going to be advertising in his own unique way for somebody that, hey, we're going to be open for business at 6. Come with your best offer.
Well, and I think, and I look at my depth here at the tackle spot. So obviously we talk tackle, we talk inside guard, we talk receiver. Those are the three base things. So talk Fano, Maui Noah, Freeling. There's 3 tackles right there that'll probably be, especially Freeling, will be available at 24. There's your tackle. Then you go to receiver. You got Tyson, you got Mekhi Lemon, you got Carnell Tate, you got Casey Concepcion. You got all these guys that we know we need to, the Browns need a receiver too. So those 2 positions to me are fairly deep. So I just don't think, and once again, everybody, the idea that they need offense, I completely understand that. But I'm a big believer in talent is what takes you over the top, regardless of where that's at. And, I'm irritated that they're so bad on offense that it's even a discussion. Because I would say, because I'm staying at 6 and I'm taking Caleb Downs right now.
I got news for you. I've been irritated for 27 years that they're so bad on offense. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head because I went back and looked this up a couple of weeks ago just because I was curious. And also, too, I think I'm a little bit of a masochist because it is just so awful. I think they've had 8 seasons out of 27 where they have scored more. They have averaged scoring more than 20 points per game. 4 of those seasons were under Kevin Stefanski. Okay? Let that marinate for a second. Kevin was here for 6 years. 4 of them, they averaged over 20 points per game. The last 2, they did not, obviously. They struggled to get to 17 per game, including this last season, right? There were games where they get to 17. I'm like, well, they're done for the day. They're done scoring. And then, and it'd be only the second quarter, and I'd be right. They got shut out in the second half. And I was just being a wise guy about it, right? And Jimmy Haslam said this when I asked him about the winning, right? Hey, you fired Kevin because you didn't win enough. You're going to win more this year. You're going to win a lot more this year. Is that what fans should expect? And Jimmy's like, well, I wouldn't say we're going to win a lot more, but we should win more. And then he went into just how ugly they are to watch, which they are. They're not fun to watch offensively at all. The big explosive plays that we heard Andrew talk about earlier when we were playing some of his thoughts on the quarterback situation with like Shedeur Sanders and whatnot. The explosive plays are almost like a surprise. Like, oh my goodness. Now, I turn on every other NFL game, and it's just explosive play after explosive play after explosive play. And I sit there and say, so this is what professional football is supposed to look like. Then I watch the Browns play, and I think I'm watching a high school team. No disrespect. But it's night and day when you talk about the quality of play offensively, the production offensively. It drives me nuts.
Well, and here I'm going to give you this. This will definitely ruffle some feathers. But a name that hasn't been brought up, my number one guy on the offensive side of the ball, when it comes to those explosives, is Jeremiah Love. No one talks about him because we have Juggins and he's outstanding. But what you're talking about is what I'm talking about. The idea of guys who are just different. Guys who can go make plays, Puka Nacua. The names rattle off every Sunday. You see it.
Ball is thrown up, and they actually go and get the football.
So you talk about a guy, even though he's at running back, he's by far my favorite guy in the draft offensively. And no one's brought him up because there's such a need at tackle, and there's such a need at guard, and they're going to have the offensive line. And what are you doing to receivers? That, to me, is a problem when you're building a roster, is that you're not taking the best guys. And if you're at 6 and you're the best guys, then if you're taking the best guys, it's Love, which the Browns don't necessarily. It's not as big.
Where do you think they get? Where would he be available though? You think he's at 24? Do you think he's at the top of the second round? Where do you think?
No, he'll be earlier. I think I think he's that talented that he's a back that it's going to be a first round guy.
So 24.
Yes. I think even before then he'll go, though.
Really?
I do. He's that talented. When you watch, and I've seen him over the last couple of days, I've seen him running some routes now. Like I'm trying to get deep into he's actually doing some things out of the slot. But once again, going what you said really wasn't, you didn't mention any position. It's just the idea guys who can be explosive, guys who can go win games without everything. Everybody else does it wrong. Every once in a while, you just need to go, I'm going to have this guy touch it because he's better than everybody else. They don't have those guys. And that's the same thing with Caleb Downs. He might get you a short field. He might get you a pick six. I understand that the need is so bad, but it's kind of warped everybody's thought process. Best players win football games, not need. Once again, that's my view on it, but I think a lot of teams think like that because those are the guys that change games. Hamilton from the Ravens, you think about these guys, they're game changers, not just because of the side of the ball they play on.
All right, well, that puts a bow on what Andrew Berry had to say. Coming up on Wednesday, tomorrow in Indianapolis, it'll be Todd Monken at the podium. We get to hear from Todd. I'm sure he's going to answer a lot of the same questions that Andrew Berry answered today. It'll be interesting to see how much he sounds like Andrew Berry, because that was the thing with Stefanski and Berry. They talked alike. How Andrew would answer the question would be similar to how Kevin would answer the question.
I'm hoping it's not the same.
I'm going to be very interested to hear how Todd Monken answers a lot of these questions. Obviously, quarterback is front and center. The wide receiver room, offensive line, and then the coaching staff that he put together, including on the defensive side of the football. And again, we mentioned Dom Capers is joining the team as a senior defensive assistant or whatever to help out on that side of the ball. Coach, great stuff.